money is a team sport. You're not supposed to do it by yourself.
Yeah. I think that that's so true, that you think you're the only one that is bad with money, is buying things because you want them. You think you're the only one, but really everybody does that.
Everybody.
Everybody. Hey, everybody, I'm Lori Schulweiss.
And I'm Jen Giamo.
And welcome to another episode of Everybody Talks, the podcast where we explore the wide world of wellness. And don't forget, if you want to watch this episode, you can go to our YouTube channel at Everybody Talks Podcast. Sometimes we talk to experts, sometimes we just talk to each other, but we're always talking to you.
Every week, we discuss topics from nutrition and exercise to mindfulness and self-care. And today we are talking all about financial fitness.
Money, money, money. Let's get started.
Okay, she is America's favorite personal financial educator, and author of the New York Times bestseller, Get Good with Money. Through her Live Richer movement, she's helped more than 2 million women save, manage, and pay off hundreds of millions of dollars of debt. A former teacher with a master's degree in education, she was instrumental in getting the Budgetnista law passed in January 2019, making financial education mandatory for middle school students in New Jersey. I love that.
I know.
That's incredible.
It's a Jersey girl here. The Budgetnista is an NAACP nominee and the first Black woman, and she's the first Black woman to receive, well, I guess you're the Budgetnista.
Yes.
I'm like referring to you like as if, okay. So the Budgetnista is an NAACP nominee and the first Black woman to grace the cover of Money magazine all by herself. She's also the co-host of the Webby Award-winning podcast Brown Ambition and has been featured on Good Morning America, The Today Show, Live with Kelly and Mark, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and now she can be seen on the new PBS series Get Good with Money with Tiffany Aliche. Please welcome Tiffany Aliche to Everybody Talks. How are you? Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Why don't you start a little bit at the beginning, just for our listeners, to explain who you are and how you got interested in personal finance and how you became the Budgetnista.
I feel like I was born the Budgetnista. I grew up learning about money. My dad was a CFO and an accountant. And I'm one of 5 girls. So anybody with children knows just how expensive it is.
Oh my gosh.
To raise kids. And so we would have like weekly meetings about chores, about homework, but also about money. He was really insistent. I think he was scared because he had no sons. Like who's going to take care of my girls? And so,
right.
I remember distinctly in college, or was it either college or high school, I asked him how come he talked to us about money so much. And he said, because one day if you decide that you do want to get married, I want you to do so because you love someone, not because you need them.
Wow.
That's great.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we just, we learned how to mow the lawn, change the oil, and make money.
Yeah. Where are you in the lineup of the girls?
I'm number 2. I'm the second oldest.
Yeah.
So I guess you can kind of say middle. I'm a very quintessential middle child, though. Like, look at me.
Yeah. Sounds familiar.
That's great.
Sounds familiar. Oh my God, that's so funny.
I want to get into the book a little bit. I know we're going to talk about the PBS series as well, but you share a lot in your book about your personal experiences, and you have these 10 steps outlined in the book. How did your personal journey kind of inform those 10 steps that you outlined in the book?
Well, even though I grew up learning about money, honestly, I made every mistake possible. In your 20s, you start to think, why do I need assistance? I know everything. And so up until about 25, I was financially perfect. I had like an 8.0, like 5 credit score. I had money saved. I was a preschool teacher at the time. I had like $30,000 saved because I had saved from work, but I also used to babysit and tutor. And so I saved. I just was really good with my money, and I got tricked by who I thought was a friend. I like to call him Jake the Thief. His name is not really Jake, but just
yeah. For the purposes of this podcast, he's Jake.
We call him Jake.
Yeah.
By then I'd saved and I bought this condo and I just got my master's in education. And when you're young, you think because someone looks rich, they're rich. And he had like a nice car and this penthouse apartment in New York. And I said, okay, how do you get all these things? And he said, well, I invest and I could teach you. And I was like, oh my God, I look stupid. Yes. Instead of asking my father with a master's in economics and a bachelor's in finance, I was like, let me ask Jake.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so he proceeded to show me how to take money off of a credit card. So I had one credit card that my dad told me to get when I was in college. He said, pay it off every month in full. And this is one of the best ways to raise your credit score. So the limit wasn't very high, maybe like, I don't know, $2,000, something like that. And I did every month, I paid it off in full. But Jake was like, your credit is so good, you can get 2 other credit cards and we could pull money off those credit cards. It's called a cash advance, which I did not know is like the worst thing. And then you give me that money and I'll invest it for you. I was like, oh my God, yes. I pulled, what was it?
Wow.
Yeah, it was about, I want to say $20,000 off the credit cards, 10,000 on each. I know, because I was like, no, we have a contract. Like, we had signed this contract, which I know. Well, the thing is, I was in my 20s. Okay, I was in my 20s.
I know. You have
Right?
to preface everything with that.
I mean, and then I remember distinctly, there were so many red flags. I remember going to the bank. So at the time I was still teaching preschool and they used to have us wear scrubs so that way you could play with the kids and not worry about your clothes. And so I used to wear these teddy bear scrubs because they were so cute. So here I am in teddy bear scrubs at the local bank saying, I'd like to take $20,000 off my card, please. They thought I was being trafficked. I remember them saying, are you okay?
Oh my
Yes,
God.
they
Oh
kept
my
me,
God.
yeah, they kept me there. I remember my lunch break was only like 30 minutes, but they kept me there for 45 minutes asking all these questions. It was literally like, red flag, Tiffany, red flag. And it just went over my head. And so I got the money, gave it to Jake. He promptly stole it. But he did play with me for a little while. Like every a few weeks, he'd be like, 'cause the thing was, Jake said that he was French, and he said he owned these like French boutiques in France, and he said that they loved American clothing and like Levi's jeans and Converse sneakers. So he said, I'm going to use the money to purchase those things, sell at my boutique, and then this will generate you about $2,000 a week. I don't even know what I was thinking. And I said, oh, I'm going to be rich. And so I said, okay. And so he said, and so the deal will be for 2 years. That doesn't even make sense. But at the time I said, oh my God, that sounds amazing. So I said, okay. So I gave him the money and he because I told him at the time I really wanted to like retire my parents. I had these visions of grandeur. And because I'd never had credit card limits that high, I was like, well, since I'm gonna be rich, I feel like I can spend on my card. So everything I learned at home went out the window. So I went from $20,000 in debt to $30,000 in debt because I used my card. And after a few months of him, because he told me it was going to take a few months, but after a few months, then he ghosted me. And I remember being like, where's Jake? I'm calling, like I call France. I'm like, oh, hola. Well, because I remember being frantic. And I was it took me almost like another 6 months to realize he's really gone. And now you got this $30,000 in credit card debt. I did not tell my dad until years later. And I thought it couldn't get any worse. I said, okay, it's fine, Tiffany, because you're a really good saver. And, when school starts back up, it was the summertime when it kind of hit me. When school starts back up, you're going to save for the next 2-3 years and you're going to pay this thing down. And that year I lost my job. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? So now I have this condo that I had purchased maybe a year or so prior. I just got my master's in education, so $50,000 in student loan debt, a $220,000 condo, $30,000 in credit card debt, and no job. And I remember I was freaking out, and I ended up moving back home with my parents. Everybody can't do that, but I was fortunate that I could do so. And I just didn't even tell my dad. I just remember I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I need to move back home. She was like, yay, because mom's always and so and I remember like my sister Lisa was like still in college at the time. So she had like in our basement, it's like a mother-in-law suite. So it was like
Yeah.
so she had the basement. And that's where I used to be before I moved out. And she was like, yeah, no. So I had to sleep in my middle school bedroom,
Oh
which
my
was like
God.
so great for my ego, and a
Wow.
twin size bed. And I remember I was like, by then I was like 29 going on 30. And I remember thinking, you're about to turn 30 and you have less money now than you did the last time you slept in this bed.
Wow.
Because when I slept in that bed, I used to babysit, I used to like dog walk and all those other kind of stuff. And I had at least a few $1,000s saved up then. And so that experience really made me say, what did I need? Because I struggled for years to kind of get back on my feet. And as I was struggling, I remember thinking, once I figured this out for myself, that I'm going to help other people, because it was still the recession. And so many of my friends were asking me questions like, Tiffany, although you lost your job like me, you seem to have some plan in place. And so I just kind of like gathered all the things I learned from home, from my father, from all of my hard lessons. It was like, okay, there are 10 components. And so this is the Get Go with Money book that it's a New York Times bestseller, but also the Get Go with Money special that's on PBS. These 10 components, which are, you have to learn to budget, to save, to manage debt, to build your credit, and to learn to earn. That's the foundational 5. And then you have to learn to invest for both retirement and wealth. You have to learn how to get the right amount of insurance, how to increase your net worth, how to build your money team, and how to estate plan. That's the next 5. So those 10 things were what I was kind of building for myself. And I realized these are kind of universal truths, if you will, especially if you live in the United
Definitely
States.
are.
And so that's what I wrote the book to.
Yeah.
And that's what I did the PBS special on. And it's changed my life and literally millions of other people's lives.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing
Yeah.
before we move on. I hope something really bad happened to
Yes.
Jake.
Let me tell you about Jake the Thief. So every couple of years, I would look him up because he has a very distinct name.
Yeah.
His name is not Jake, right?
Yeah.
So he had a very distinct name. So every couple of years, I would look him up to see, like, not wishing the worst, but not exactly wishing the best.
Not the
Right?
best.
So I'd be looking him up, and then, yes, I hit jackpot. Some years back, apparently, I guess he was scamming other people.
Sure.
And then he tried to scam the United States government, and they were like, no, 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 no. So
Oh,
Jake is
no
currently in jail. And the thing is so terrible, 'cause I'm reading like his case. So he has a twin brother, but they're fraternal. He tried to blame it on his twin brother.
Oh my
Because
Wow.
yes, I'm reading. This guy was a piece of work. I'm reading in it that
Yeah.
like he tried to say whatever scam that he was running, like, how do you know it was me? I have a twin. And they found out that they were fraternal. They were like, it's you,
Okay,
sir.
you don't look alike.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he's currently
Wow.
in jail. I would say, hey, Jay, in case you're listening.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
it sounds like he kind of got what he
He
deserved.
got his
Unfortunately,
comeuppance.
he wasn't forced to pay back all the people that he
I know.
scammed.
Yeah, I can only
but-
imagine how many other people that
Yeah.
for him to have all the things that he had when I met him.
Right.
That's unbelievable.
Holy cow.
Unbelievable. All right, so I like those steps. I'm very overwhelmed by them and a little intimidated. So I want to kind
Yeah.
of like talk
Yeah.
through that. I am not good with money.
And neither am I.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my biggest regrets, which I think I've said before on this podcast, is that when I started at the Walt Disney Company 30 years ago now, I did not start a 401k right away.
Okay.
I started it many years in, and because at the time when I started, I had debt, and so I was like, okay, I need the money to pay off the debt, not realizing it was like a slippery slope. I mean, me and debt are friends. And so that I regret it. And then my ex-husband got me to start a 401k, and then when we got divorced, he took half of it. So it wasn't that much money. And there's, thanks to Jen's boyfriend who works in finance, he rejiggered, and so I made back the money with the market's help that he took. But still, it's not the millions, the massive amount of money I would have had if I had done it when I first started. I think that's my biggest regret in my lifetime, is that I didn't start it right away. So if you're 25 and listening to this and at your first job, start a 401k, because when you're 60, you're going to be so thankful.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
So let's talk about, being that we're all women here and we just divulged that neither of us are good with money. What do you think are the biggest financial challenges that women face, and how can they overcome them?
I think the number one financial challenge that women face is the mindset component.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, so many women tell themselves that they can't do it. So it's not a competence issue. It's a competence issue, not a capability issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, do you have children? Do you know it's so hard? Like, if you're raising this kid, I promise you, like, doing a budget is not that hard in comparison to figuring out, is your kid happy? Is your kid sad? What do they want for lunch? If they're going to eat dinner? Like, women do so much that is 10 times harder. And then when it comes to money, we've been taught, oh, poor little woman, you don't know. It's like, yeah, no, you have all the skills necessary, to master your money. I think that's why I like to start with the foundational 5, right? So it's like creating a budget, but then automating it so you don't have to navigate it week after week, month after month, and then creating this automatic plan that kind of stashes your money for savings, because savings is critical, and then you don't have to be debt free, but like having like a plan that like, okay, this is how I manage my debt. Because I'm actually not as financially responsible as people think, but I've created systems for myself so that the systems do the work. It does take a little work to set them up, but once you set them up, the systems will help me manage my debt more effectively. The systems, and when you manage your debt and you save and you budget, guess what? Your credit almost by default starts to raise. So that's one of the foundational 5. And then the last piece of the foundational 5 is learning to earn, because you can't budget your way to wealth. It is that's the management tool, but you have to earn something in order to manage. And so, yeah, once women can shift that mindset and to realize that I am capable, I am able, I've done way harder things, I can figure this out. I tell women, I'm like, how'd you figure out your hair color? You know what I
That's
mean?
so
Like, we will
funny.
spend years being like, the right
Yeah.
highlight. You know how long it took me to get this eyebrow shape perfect? Because
Yeah.
I remember I lived through the 90s, the 80s when it was too thin, too thick, and I'm like, I was like, Tiffany, you spent your whole life figuring out your skin routine, your
Yeah.
eyebrow routine. You're like the exact. I know exactly the type of jeans that fit my body perfectly. So you mean to tell me you could do all of that, but not put a budget together, please?
Yeah.
You are more than
Oh
capable.
my
So yeah,
God.
the capability is.
Yeah, I think it's more of like, at least for me, it's like the I mean, I know that I can do it. And like Lori said, my boyfriend is in this industry, in the finance industry, so it's
Yeah.
a little bit kind of a joke. But there's this fear around it. There's like this fear
I
of
think
like,
that's true.
if I see it and I know what's there, I'm going to start to freak out that there's not enough money coming in, and how am I going to do all these things? And so, but the flip side is that then you just totally ignore it and stuff it away, and then you have a credit score of 600.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Well, I'll say that one of the best. So fear makes the wolf bigger than he is.
Yeah.
Like I always imagine that we're like on the other side of the door. It's like this big gnarling wolf, and I'm so scared. And you open it, it's like a wolf puppy, and you're like, oh,
Right.
wasn't
Yeah.
as bad as I thought.
Not so horrible.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the ways though to alleviate that fear and shame, a lot of women carry shame around money,
Yeah.
is you have to give voice to it. And so when I lost everything, I didn't tell my dad, but I told my best friend Linda. Because I had been like laying low for 6 months. I wasn't going out. I wasn't picking up the phone. And she was calling me. Everything was like short answers. But your best friend knows you like well. She's like, what the hell is wrong with you? I was like, everything's fine. She's like, yeah, it's not. And I was like, and I was like, I lost my job. I lost my, I just telling her all the things. And she was like, I had to move back home and I'm 29, going on 30. I'm supposed to be an adult. She's like, I'm calling you from my mother's couch. So she's like, have you taken a look around, Tiffany? It's the recession. All of us are broke.
Yeah.
And so she helped to normalize
Right.
kind of like that fear. And then she helped me to open up all the pink and red envelopes. Many of you know, like when your bills are late, they used to send them in pink and red envelopes.
Mhm.
And so to navigate kind of like that fear is to not go it alone. Truthfully, community is a core component.
Yeah.
And so Linda's not a financial expert. She's just my best friend that loves me.
Mhm.
And so I literally, on Saturdays, I used to be like, you bring your bills and I'll bring mine. And I would open hers because I'm not attached to it. Like, ooh, this one says,
Yeah.
you owe. And then we would write
Right.
it down and we would laugh about it like, ooh, girl, you're doing too much of Victoria's Secret. And, we'd laugh, because it made me realize that, one, I'm not ashamed because Linda, too, is struggling. But then two, like I knew I had a safe space to unpack some of the fear that I was carrying, but then we would create a plan together. So that's what I would say is that like that fear is natural, but that's because you're not supposed to. Money is a team sport. You're not supposed to do it by yourself.
Yeah. I think that's so true that you think you're the only one that is bad with money, is buying things because you want them. You think you're the only one, but really everybody does that.
Everybody.
Everybody.
Except my boyfriend.
I
He
mean,
doesn't
Except for
do
Tim.
it.
I know.
I know you
Except for
get a
Tim.
handful of people, but honestly, I mean, I have worked with doctors, lawyers, nurses, mechanics across the board. You'd be so surprised. Truthfully, what I have found is the more the people make, typically the worse they are. The worse they
So
are.
I think also, just from what I hear, with different types of income levels, I guess I would say, it doesn't matter how much you make.
Right.
It's how much you save. And you could make, somebody making $1 million or somebody making 30,000. The person making 30,000 could have more money saved.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So I think
but
that's
why,
important.
Actually, why don't you address that? Like, how did you go about saving the money to be able to pay off the debt? I mean, when you have a mountain of debt, I mean, $30,000 is not chump change, and if you're already making nothing, but then you get a job and you still have to eat and pay rent, and I mean, I guess you lived at home, but how does someone go about very rudimentarily, I don't even think that's a word, saving money and getting rid of that debt?
Well, how it started for me really was, like I said, well, one, I had to lay out, who do I owe? What do I owe? How much? From the debt perspective, but also two, what do my bills look like? And so I had to start with level one of budgeting, which is when you just do your health and safety budget. This means sometimes other people are not going to get paid right now. People are like, oh, I'm like, I remember I had to be like, hey, Verizon. So here's the thing. I don't have it. So that's why you don't have it. So I had to literally just say, Tiffany, of the things that you have to pay, what maintains your health and safety? Because I actually don't have it. And so there's some bills. Now, the thing is, if you're not going to pay that bill, you do have to call them and say, hey, like, here's where I am right now. Is there any assistance or help or whatever that kind of looks like? But there were some bills that just went late. And yes, it tanked my credit score. But I knew that credit was one of the easiest things. It's just tips and tricks. So I was just like, I'll just have to take I'll have to take the loss on my credit score temporarily. And so I was on unemployment. I ended up moving out because I could not stay with my parents past like 9 months. I was like, you guys are driving me crazy. So a friend of mine was renting like an apartment, and she said I could rent the room in her apartment for $500 a month.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was back in college because like a bunch of women who were like in their like late 20s, early 30s, kind of like just renting a room. And I remember I couldn't even, like, I walked everywhere. I was never more fit because I walked everywhere. I could not afford the gas for my car. So I walked literally everywhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so I started with just that health and safety budget and then making the phone calls to the people who I couldn't, pay. So that was level one.
Did you sell your condo that you had bought?
So during that time, during the recession, if you remember, there was a huge uptick in foreclosures, so much so that they could not process them right away. And so New Jersey was like tremendous. So I had that condo for maybe 2 or 3 years before they could finally get to me. And so I remember calling them and saying, hey, I don't have the mortgage. So I was renting out the condo. So my mortgage was $1,660. And I would say, I think I was renting out the condo for $1,200 is really what it could go for. Right? So I called them. I said, I can send you $1,200 a month. I don't have the $1,660. They said, well, you can't send $1,660. We don't want it. I was like, well, then I do. Yeah, they didn't.
Yeah.
So that $1,200 was like, well, that's money for Tiffany.
Right.
I was getting. So that was one. So I had unemployment. I had the $1,200 from my tenant, and then I was babysitting, tutoring, any kind of odd job I could get my hands on.
Wow.
And so that's when I was like, okay, I went from just health and safety budget to the bare bones, what I call your noodle budget. So remember, like when you had to survive off ramen noodles in college, this means the noodle budget is you have just enough to pay the necessities, nothing extra.
Right.
So like I had to learn to do my own hair, my own brows, my own grooming, all the other stuff. There was no going out, unless it was free. And especially if they had free food, then I'm like, I'll be there. And so like that was like when I was like, okay. And I remember that's when I kind of started the Budgetnista, and I was getting like, I started working with the United Way to teach financial education to the community. And the United Way paid me. So I was like, okay, now I've got my the money from these odd jobs. I got the money from my rent and the United Way. So that was enough to put me just a little bit above not having, not to just pay my noodle budget, which is just the bare bones necessities budget. And that's when I started to say, okay, I can start to pay off my credit card debt. Now, one of the smartest things that I did was that before my credit score tanked, I knew that I could do a balance transfer. This is when whatever, like whatever you owe. So when you do a balance, when you take money off of your card, which like the interest rate is ridiculous, which is like, 20%, whatever. It's crazy. A balance transfer allows you to transfer your balance from a card with a high interest rate to a card with a 0 or really low interest rate. And because my credit score was still really good, because all my bad habits had not hit, I was like, let me do this for now before they find out about me. I was able to transfer most of my balance to a card of 0% interest for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, because I had like an 800 score still, yes.
Yeah.
And so that's not typical, but at the time I was able to do that. So that was great. That means I had 2 years to just pay the principal.
Wow.
So that meant every dollar I gave to the credit card company actually went to what I owed, not what I owed plus interest. So that helped me to expedite. So for the first year, I really could just pay the bare minimum, because I didn't have any money. But then the second year when I started working with the United Way and the odd jobs kicked in, then I was like, okay, let me put as much as possible to get this card. So that, because I have 1 year to try to get it down as much as I could. And And then even toward the end of that, I wasn't eligible for another balance transfer, but by then the business started to pick up more. And I was able to do a regular budget where I was like, okay, hey, folks who I didn't have the money to pay, now I can pay you, something, put me into a
Right.
program.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes
Right.
that's what it looks like. When you're broke, you have to just take care of yourself, meaning you don't have
Yeah.
enough for anything except for your necessities. Well, then people will have to wait. And I was getting harassed by debt collectors until I learned how to get them to stop, which is there's a laws in place where debt collectors can't call you if you send them a letter saying you cannot call me here. This is how you can communicate with me. And so basically it's a cease and desist letter, right? That you can basically say, hey, here's how you're allowed to communicate with me. And I went down to Staples and I faxed it because you get an instant return receipt. And they know that if they get caught still communicating with you in a way that they're not supposed to,
Oh, that's
that
so interesting.
yeah. So I learned that right away. So I was like, okay, now I have a little reprieve. I owe
Yeah.
you, but it doesn't mean you can harass me. And once I
Yeah.
got back on my feet, I was able to call them and say, okay, so now what can we do?
Yeah.
And that's just real life, that sometimes everyone's
Yeah.
not going to get their money. You got to look after yourself. But as you do better, then you say, okay, now what can I do? But the key is you have to keep open communication.
Well, that's
Even if
what I
they
was just going
say,
to say. Yeah.
even if they say
It can't
no,
be
you
like
have to pay us.
a hole in the ground. Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
that was so smart of you to reach out and find these other ways and, financial hardship and, these different ways to put off paying. But then you turned around and said, okay, now I have the money. So what can I pay? I think
Yes.
that is not typical of what people do who are in debt or who can't.
Yeah.
I
Because
think.
it's scary. That's
It's
why. But I
scary.
had Linda to be like, okay, so
Right.
now, guys were like, you want to be on three-way? Back in 8th grade, you're like, let's call Sarah and see what she really thinks about me. So it was like, you want to be on three-way? And then here's the thing. The number one thing that I did during that time is I cured the mistake that put me in that position anyway, which is I didn't ask for help when I met Jake the thief. I just
Yeah.
thought, I know what's best. I'm 20 something years old. But after that, I said, never again.
Yeah.
And so I would ask for help across the board. So I found about the cease and desist because a friend of a friend was a debt lawyer.
Mm.
He was like, oh no, Tiffany, they don't have to call you. Here, send this letter. And this is,
Yeah.
by law. I was like, I never knew that.
Yeah.
He was like,
Yeah.
yeah, because you can get a debt lawyer like me, and every instance that they break the law, they might owe you up to $1,000 per
Right, they
phone
get
call.
fined.
Wow.
And I was like,
Wow.
what? But these are
Wow.
things if I had not asked the questions.
Yeah.
And
You
so I
would never
started
have
to
known.
ask questions about,
Sure.
and what else can I do? And what else should it look like? I remember even with my home, the banks were so sneaky because they knew that it was going to be years before they could foreclose, that sometimes they would put a lock on your door, and I remember calling my friend Michaela, who was an attorney. I was like, Michaela, they locked my door. She was like, no, girl, that is illegal. That you haven't gone to court. What they're hoping is that you will be so afraid that you'll just leave it, and then they can go to court and say she abandoned the property, and they can
Oh.
Yeah.
expedite the foreclosure process. She was like, you know anybody with lock cutters? I was like, I do. She was like, go ahead and cut them off, because they know that's what they're hoping. But I would not have known that had I not asked questions.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so
Totally.
that's critical in your financial process, is that you cannot go it alone. That's why that financial team in the 10 steps that I shared is so critical.
Yeah.
That it's like, yes, your accountability partner, but also asking questions of people who might know more than you.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
I just want to talk about the credit score for a second. So what are some tips for people who, I guess, A, want to build their credit score? Because you said it's relatively easy to do that. And B, how long does it take to build it back up once it's tanked?
So credit score is the easy. I'm like, if credit is your only issue, count yourself lucky, because it's literally tips and tricks. So it depends. You have to understand your credit score is like your GPA, your grade point average. It's an average of your financial choices, especially in the last 2 years. So every time you're late, that's an F. Every time you're on time, that's a B. Every time you're in full, that's an A. And so this is what I learned from Phil, the debt lawyer. Because I was like, oh, Phil, but then he was like, don't worry about it. He said, this is how you're going to raise your credit, Tiffany. You are going to, once you get on your feet and you pay off that card, you either get a new card or keep that card and put the smallest debt the smallest bill you can find, which was the gym, Planet Fitness, $10 a month, on that credit card, and pay it off in full every month automatically. Don't put anything else on that card.
Smart.
He
That's
said,
so
because
smart.
you could get an A every single month. Yeah. So the thing is, the credit bureaus, when you pay off a debt in full, that's an A++. And so it could be you pay off your car, you pay off your home, or the small little debt on your credit card.
Right.
It's all the
It's still the
same.
same A++. Yes.
Yeah.
So now I had all these F's and D's, but then every month I was getting an A+ to offset. An A+. So I had enough F's and D's that it took me about 2 years because I had a foreclosure. They finally eventually took the home. I had a foreclosure, which is like an F minus, 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 minus. So it takes a lot of A's to offset.
Yeah.
You know? But so it took me about 2 years to go from, my credit score fell down to, I think it was like a 530, which is like not that great, terrible, right? To a 750. And I still had an active foreclosure because that stays on your credit report for like 7 years.
Oh,
So I had a better credit score than people who never had a foreclosure because of all the A's I accumulated. Because eventually I did 2 credit cards like that, where I was like, well, if I can get 1 A+ a month, what about 2? And I left the cards at home and I just automatically had my bank account pay them off every month in full. Like I put Netflix on one and, the gym on the other. And
that's so smart.
That's what I was going to ask you then. So then do you recommend that people, like every bill of mine usually comes out of my debit card, but would you recommend that I put that on a credit card and then just be able to pay it off to raise my score?
You have to know yourself. Like, here's the thing about me. If there's cookies in the house, I'm going to eat them.
Right.
Now, if they're not here, I'm good. I'm like, Tiffany, but I have no self-control. If cookies are here, I'm going to eat them. So you have to know yourself when it comes to, so it took me a while to trust myself enough. Now, all of my bills do go on my credit card because I get to earn points. I haven't paid for a flight in I don't know how many years, but it took me a while to get to that place because what I don't want you to do is put all your bills on your credit card and then you don't pay your credit card. And it's like now it's compounded because you owe not just the bills, but the interest. So you have to know yourself well enough. Like, are these cookies? Are you capable of, for me, I can do that now and have it automated. But yeah, I suggest that if you know that you won't not pay the bill.
Yeah, I just recently started working with a financial planner, and that was the first thing they told me to do is because they gave me, they want me to, I consolidated all my money, and then they gave me a brand new credit card, and they're like, put everything on this card. If you spend this much money in the first few months, then you're going to get all these points, and all the points is what you want, and you can pay it off. So it's like, just do it. And it's very counterintuitive to me because I had everything coming out of my bank account because then I don't have to think about it.
And also, too, if there's a mistake made, credit card companies tend to be on your side.
Up.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, it's great because I'm like, wait a minute, what's this? And plus, too, credit card companies sometimes you'll get your monthly report depending what kind of credit card you have. And it kind of tells you in the clothing department, you spent this. In entertainment, you spent this. So it kind of gives you like a breakdown of who you are and how you're navigating. But yeah, no, I suggest that to people, but only if you know that you're not someone who is, because you don't want to, now you owe $10,000 in your credit card a month. And
exactly.
You're like, oh my God.
Paying your rent on a credit card is the stupidest thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, unless you could pay it off.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's something for me to think about. I like that advice. Okay.
But also an easy thing you could do too. So I did this for my little sister, Lisa. She's the baby of all 5 of us. And so I added her on as an authorized user. So this is one of the quickest, fastest ways you can raise your credit score. So Lisa, as you can imagine, being the baby, we have spoiled her terribly. She's the 35-year-old baby. We have spoiled her because I'm 9 years older than her. So we had spoiled her terribly. So when she was in college, she's like, my credit score is terrible. I was like, okay, I'm going to add you to a credit card that I pay off every month in full. So what happens is that with an authorized user, it's not having like a joint credit card. So she's added on and she gets to inherit my good behavior, but she doesn't get the credit card. Now, she could inherit your bad behavior too. That's why you only do it with someone that pays off their credit card in full. Yeah. And also too, typically you have to share like your social security number, the last 4 digits. So you really want it to be somebody like your mom, your dad, somebody you trust. And so I added Lisa on and her credit score raised tremendously because it was a card that I paid off every month. And then one time, I don't know what happened, but they didn't take their money like out of my bank account. And it was late. I didn't even notice because I didn't pay it. And she called me cussing and fussing. My credit score. God. I was like, ooh, my bad.
It's on me.
But that's the problem is that you inherit the good and the bad. But for the most part, so it raised her credit score tremendously. So it's a way to raise your credit score where you don't actually have to do any work. Like someone else, they literally call it piggybacking, as you get to get on someone's back and let them take you to the credit score promised land.
Wow.
I'm very good at that piggybacking.
You are very
thing.
good.
So
you're
maybe
a trained professional piggybacker.
But I never knew that. That's also
Yeah.
really, really good
I know.
to know. I don't know
It's
if,
good to know because
well, Tim is so good with,
I know.
I wonder if he would do that. I don't think he,
I don't think
so I wouldn't actually have the credit card.
No, you wouldn't
Right.
have the credit card. So
Yeah,
just
see,
be
like,
like,
he could
could
do
you
that
add
and
me
give
as
you
an
the credit.
authorized user? I wouldn't have the credit card. I would just inherit your good behavior. He would not
Yeah.
inherit yours. It's just a one-way flow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And at any
Okay.
moment they can take it off. But yeah, it's typically piggybacking is what parents did for their kids
Yes.
to start them on their
Yes,
credit
yes.
journey. So that's why I learned
Yes.
about it because my dad did it for all of us.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, okay. And so it literally requires nothing. It's just, you can't even log in. You don't get access. You don't anything. You just call the credit card company together and say, hey, I'd like to add someone as an authorized user. They'll ask whatever pertinent questions. And then that's literally it. You don't get any information. They don't even ever see a bill. So
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna have a conversation. Thank you. That's very helpful. That's very helpful.
Who's this damn budgetnista?
I know.
You might get a phone call.
Yeah.
Um,
That's funny.
Tiffany, what about people? Like, what are some strategies? Talked a little bit about investing. And what about people, like Lori mentioned, she didn't start her 401k till very late. People who are late to the game, can they still build wealth? And what does that
Is
look
it ever
like?
too late?
Is it
That's
ever
always
too
my
late?
question. Is it ever too late?
No, you'll likely have to work a little longer.
Yes.
But there's something called catch-up contributions
Yes.
that if you are above the age of 50, when you're putting money in like a retirement account, they'll let you put additionally. So I can't remember what
It's $7,500.
yeah. So right now the regular standard is $7,500, but it's $11,250.
Yes.
So you do
Yes.
additional, yes.
Yes.
So 60. Yes, you're right. It is 60. I don't know what I thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's great. So that means if you have it, not everyone has it, but if you
Yeah.
have it, you can add additional money because they know that sometimes people are behind the eight ball.
Yeah.
And so the thing is that truthfully, if you started late, the key is going to be that you're going to have to say, I have to prioritize earning.
Yes.
And typically this is the age where you should be able to earn more more anyway, because you have more, maybe you have more education, you have more experience, more networking because you know more people. So you really want to maximize how much can I earn during this time period so you can put away as much as possible.
Like, how do you impart that kind of how important it is to save when you're young for when you're older? I think
have
that's
to
very
say,
hard.
This new generation, social media has really, it's not always great, but this is one of the spaces where it gets it right and that it's normalized the conversation around money. The studies I see is that like, I was looking at a study the other day and it said something to the effect of like, over 60 or 70% of millennial women are investing and saving. And it's a tremendous shift up from where we used to be before.
Yeah.
Because it's become normal. It's like, well, of course I am. And so I think that's one of the ways is that you have to make the conversation normal. I grew up in a house where we talked about money. So I never was afraid of money until I made my own huge mistakes, but it didn't come from home. It was normal to say like, of course you're going to save. Like I've got a bonus daughter, Alyssa, since she was little. I remember we started to my late husband and I would tell him we're going to use different language. Like she would love to go to Staples or Target or whatever. And I would say, well, what's your budget? Because I wanted to normalize certain language. She's like, my budget. I'm like, yeah, didn't you get like money for your birthday? And she's like, yeah, my birthday money. I'm like, no, that's your budget because this is how much you can spend. And then I got her a piggy bank that was like 1/3 spending, 1/3 giving, 1/3 saving.
Yeah.
And so I told her every time you get money, you have to put a little money in each. And she was like, but what's the giving part? And I would say, well, you know how much you love animals? Or remember that time you saw that unhoused person on the street? Next time we go, you could pull money out and share it with like, the shelter or that person. She's like, okay. But you see, like just normalize. And now she's 18. She just started college and she's got a full scholarship, which is great. She just got her first credit card, which I already know that it's only $500. So I tell myself, it can only be a $500 mistake, Tiffany.
Yeah, I know. Totally. Oh my God. Yeah.
She got to make it, but the great thing is since she was like 14, she does like social media for my company. So I had been maxing out her 401k.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the beginning though, she didn't get it. I remember the first time I told her, I think it was like $5,000 was the max then. I said, you're about to get, you're going to see a big lump sum of money that's going to land in your bank account. Do not touch it because it's going to pull right out. So I was paying her just enough to max out her 401k. And so it landed and my financial advisor was like, we went to pull the money out, but it said insufficient funds. I'm like, what? So I called her and she's like, wait, was that the money you were talking about? I was like, Alyssa, put that daggone money back. So
Oh my God. Oh
thankfully
my
she hadn't
God.
spent it yet. I was like, oh my gosh. She took like, I don't know, like $1,000 out. I'm like, what have you been buying for $1,000? So she put it back. But every year we've been maxing out. And so she has 4 years. So she's already started to set aside for retirement,
Wow.
even though she doesn't fully get it. But we
Yeah.
have the conversations. Like,
Yeah.
because the other day, she texts because I like her to know my financial advisor, Anjali. She texts her, and Anjali texts me, she's like, look what Alyssa sent me. She said, with the money, because she calls me Tiffy, with the money that Tiffany has set aside for me, how much can I access now? This is what she texts her secretly. I
Yeah.
was like, but I love the fact that she's asking a financial advisor.
Yes.
You know, so I told Anjali,
Yes.
tell her that it is locked away for life. I was like, no, that she cannot access
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Because some of it, there's access for her after college. I've set aside some money for her after college, but
Yeah.
most of it is set aside for her retirement.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's, you know, to me, it's just the conversations,
How
Yeah.
you know,
great.
and I also too, I'm teaching her that, like, you know, I'm glad she knows she could talk to Anjali, because I want her to know that also too, that you should not be navigating this by yourself. You should start to build your team and your network of financial educators, if you will. And so, yeah,
Yes.
that's the key, is to normalize the process, but social media
Yeah.
really helps to do so.
Yeah, I think you're right. I feel like I have seen a lot more of that with the younger
Mhm.
generation. And especially with, all these side hustles and all
I
these,
know
it's like I have a
everybody.
job, but I also do this. And so they're aware of,
Mhm.
earning and I guess saving, it sounds like. So
Sure.
whereas that was not the case for me at all. It was like,
No.
oh, I make this much. That means I can spend
Spend
this
this
much.
much. I definitely never did a budget, which has got me into a lot of trouble.
If you have children, you have to talk to them about it.
Yes.
I think a lot of parents think, well, if I don't know, how can I teach them?
Yeah.
Well, then watch videos together. Pull up YouTube videos.
Yeah.
You know, like there's like a Netflix or like a All About Money special, and
Mhm.
talk through it and say
Yeah.
like, well, what did you think? And, make it
Definitely.
regular conversations. It doesn't have to be like the sit down that like I had with my parents, but it could be like how I did with Alyssa, which is when we went shopping, we would talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, what is your budget? And even now I'm like, well, she wanted to buy a car. And I was like, okay. I told her, because my husband, her dad passed away in 2021.
I'm sorry for that.
Sorry.
Thank you. And so I told her, like, okay, that at first I told her she could have her dad's car, but it was too big. It was like a Cadillac. And I said at the time, because we were all emotional, but then someone ended up actually hitting the car, like on the street. It was parked. But it was a blessing, because it was too big for even me to drive. And I was driving it to hold it for her. But they gave me like $15,000 for that car. And so I was able to say, okay, here's your budget. And so, because at first she was like, "Ooh, you know what I like? I like Audis." I'm like, "Oh, we're twins, me too, girl. You're just getting an Audi." You
I
crazy?
know.
Like,
That's
what?
funny.
Yeah. And then I told her, I was like, "You have a choice between a Toyota or a Honda." She was like, "Honda." I was like, "See how easy
Yeah.
that is."
Yeah.
But what I really loved was that I had not purchased a car in so long. And I said, so we watched a series of TikTok videos from this guy called Billy the Car Kid. It was
Wow.
about how to purchase, because we were getting a used car, obviously, how to
Yeah.
purchase a used car. It was so informational. And at first I thought, like, she's annoyed. You know how teenagers are, because they're
Yeah.
annoyed by life. So we're watching it and watching it and watching it. We watched like all these videos, and I'm like, she was just kind of sitting there with her like face, like, whatever. And that was like, maybe this wasn't a good idea. So then we go over the weekend to purchase a car. So she saw a car that she liked. It's like 2017 Honda
Yeah.
CRV. It's like a small little crossover. It's perfect for a teenager.
Mhm.
And I'm about to open my mouth to negotiate, and she is like, well, actually, I was like, not her listening.
Wow.
I remember because the first car she saw, this is before we watched the videos, she was so upset that we didn't get it. I'm like, no, Alyssa, it's like a crappy car. They want too much. And she was like, you don't want me to get a car. I was like, ugh. So then we watched the videos, because I wanted her to have some agency. So this time she was like, actually, we're going to leave. Let us know if the price comes down. I was like, oh. And so that social media can really be helpful. And so we left.
Wow.
And of course, they did call us back, and we got it at the price. And net, we didn't have to come out of pocket, because we just used the insurance money.
Yeah.
And now she's in school, she drives, and she's still like, I don't have any money for gas. I'm like, that's on you, girl.
Yeah.
She does work. She has like a little job at Foot Locker. She works on the weekends. And I'm like, that should be enough for gas. But what I love is that that's that conversation, because now she's living the financial life,
That's right.
Mhm.
That's
and
right.
so, but I have to give her the tools.
Sure. Yeah.
But I was really proud to know that, like, I will say that this generation understands that they don't have to make these financial choices by
I
themselves.
know. Yeah.
You hope they choose the right people to listen to, because sometimes people online, obviously, don't have their
Right.
best interest, but it's out there.
Yeah.
You want
Yeah.
to get good with money. So honestly, I would suggest if you are a reader, I've got my book, Get Good with Money. It walks you
Yeah.
through step by step. So because I was a school teacher, especially a preschool teacher, I really mastered the art of taking you from a place of no knowledge to knowledge.
Yeah.
Because have you ever tried to teach a 3-year-old? You're like, ooh, A is for apple. They're like, what's an apple? You're like, oh my God.
Yeah. Totally.
You gotta
That's
start
what we are. Yeah.
You gotta start from scratch. So
You
but
know where
Yeah.
we're coming from.
Yeah.
yeah, but that's what I do. I start from scratch. But also, too, I've got my new PBS special, also called Get Good with Money. It's on 300 PBS stations, nationwide. So you could just look up for your local station. Or if you go to pbs.org and type in Get Good with Money, it'll show you where you can watch it online or where it airs in person, airs on your TV. And I walk through those 10 steps. But if you want to hear me teach it out loud, then it's great. I had a lot of fun. It's fun. And remember, do not do money by yourself. Don't, you need your accountability partner. I'm here to help. I'm the Budgetnista on all the social platforms and
Yeah.
thebudgetnista.com. And there's, if you don't, because, some people can't even afford a book. That's why PBS is
that's
free.
Yeah.
You can watch
Great.
it, So
Totally.
there's so many resources
Amazing.
available to you.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This
Thank
was
you.
really, really
I
great.
know. Very informative.
I learned so much.
I feel like it's great that you've been through these things yourself.
Yes.
It's like I learned more from you telling stories about your own life
Absolutely.
than just like spouting off like
you
the
should do
facts
this
of
and you should
the-
do
yeah,
that.
It's so much,
and you
more
came from,
helpful.
you've had these hardships
Yeah, like
and
what you
you've
did.
overcome
Yeah.
them. And I think
1000%.
that's amazing. Like that's,
I'm grateful
Yes.
to Jake the Thief. I think about that from time to time. I'm
You
like,
know,
hey,
yeah,
jailbird.
change the course.
Just so you know what? Life's pretty good. Despite,
I know, it changed the course of your life.
It did.
changed the course of your life.
Yeah.
When something happens like that to you.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being
Yeah,
here. Tiffany
Thank you for
Aliche.
having me, Lori. and
Thank
Jen.
you.
Take care. Money, 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 money.
I know. That was really, really
Yeah.
informative. I am going to see if I can become an authorized user.
I bet you are.
But I
Except
mean,
you'd like the card.
well, I would also like the card,
Yeah.
but I think that I think the way to
Well, but your credit score must be good. You don't have any debt. You do?
yeah, I have some debt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I do.
Okay.
And I think just my past, like I've paid things late.
Yeah.
I'm not good. I was
I
not
have
good.
to say, for all of my trouble with debt, I was never late.
Never late.
I
That's
was
good.
Never ever late.
That's good. I think
Um,
also what screwed me up was, and I didn't get to ask her about this, but like, what about women who?
Oh,
or
I know.
men,
That
or
was on your
whoever,
questions. I really
Yeah,
wanted to
who
ask
get
that.
divorced,
Right.
And
'cause
then
then
you're
all of a
stuck.
sudden you're stuck.
Yeah. So, I think that kind of screwed me up a little bit. But I was able to get a mortgage on my own. So,
Right.
Anyway,
not
but
bad.
it wasn't that bad. But yeah, she was really great. I learned more than I thought I was going to.
See, you didn't.
It wasn't
think-
so scary.
Yeah, it wasn't scary, and I think she, like I was saying to her after when we were done, it's like hearing that she went through all that makes it so
Yeah,
relatable.
totally.
that you're like, oh, if she did it, I could do it.
Yeah. That's what I really liked, was that
Yeah.
it was so relatable, and she, had some major hardships.
Totally.
But
Yeah. Anyway, we hope you learned a couple of things too, and managing your money. And I'm Lori Schulweiss.
and I'm Jen Giamo.
This was Everybody Talks.
Talk to you next time.
Take care.
For more information about our podcast, to learn more about us, and to catch up on all of our episodes, go to our website at everybodytalkspodcast.com.
Follow us on Instagram at Shirley, at Jen Giamo, and at Everybody Talks. And if you want to watch today's episode, go to our YouTube channel at Everybody Talks Podcast.
Join the Everybody Talks community by checking out our Patreon page, where you can become an exclusive member of our wellness group and be a part of the conversation.
And don't forget, if you like what you've heard, give us a 5-star rating, write a review, and tell a friend. We're for everybody and everybody. The Everybody Talks podcast is co-created, executive produced, and hosted by us, Lori Schulweiss and Jen Giamo. Produced and edited by Station 16.
Our theme song music is written and performed by Jackie Ryle and Aaron Navisi, with additional support from our pups, Oliver, Milo, and Murray.
Talk to you next time.